Hey you! You clicked on this because you want to know how to find your art style. And yeah, this is understandable. We all went through that. We all want to have a style that is recognizable by all and can serve as our signature. Everyone who read a manga by Bochi can recognize pieces, spin-offs, and even totally random ecchis made by him. And stuff that will look like his work will be called boichi-like. And same goes for other legends of the industry like Akira Toriyama in Dragon Ball, Yusuke Murata with One Punch Man and I Shield 21 if you read that, Oda with One Piece, and even Hiro Mashima. You can love or hate Fairy Tail, but pretty much everyone agrees this dude is a badass at drawing. If you don't read manga, you probably know of Instagram artists with styles that make you go wow, I suck. Like Wlop, Guaze, Kushivna, Hilya, and many others. However, how to find your art style is a pretty flawed question in the first place. Why? Because an art style is not something you stumble over. Like, you don't wake up, start drawing someday, and all of a sudden you feel like drawing things this or this way. It's something you develop and that comes naturally. You might become good at art and realize afterwards that you had found your art style without even thinking about it, but yeah, it's not something you stumble over, it's something that you develop. So the real question you should be asking is how to get good, how to accelerate your way to develop your art style, how to draw better than you drew yesterday. Because art style, as I said earlier, is not something you need to stress over. And in my experience, the more you start to stress over finding your art style, the less progress you will make. Because you will shift your focus out of creating and becoming actually better, and on something that for most of us is actually rather undefined. So while we are there, what the hell is art style? If I've based myself off art is fun, an art style is the following. Alright, that's already something much more concrete and that we can argue about. We won't because I agree with it, and if you disagree, you are wrong. But now, how do you actually develop that? And learn how to play with forms, color, composition, and the likes? Well, for that you will need to better your understanding of the subject matter. To start drawing an eye in your style, you need to be able to draw and understand why a realistic eye looks like it does. Why these folds are there, why these hairs are there, where are the irises, etc, etc. This way you can stylistically simplify or amplify whatever element in the eyes to make it yours. And like create actually an art style. And this notion will apply to literally anything else. Be it how to draw expressions, bodies, cars, animals, trees, etc, etc. Obviously you don't need to become an anatomy god to draw something that looks good or appealing. I don't consider myself one, and I like to think that I'm not too bad at drawing. However, you need to know the basics, which is why first step would be to develop some anatomical skills. Build bodies with squares and circles, learn the proportions of head to torso to legs, the proportions in the face, etc. Once you have a somewhat decent grasp of that, just go to town with it and experiment. You'll notice that by bettering your grasp of anatomy, your OCs, ludes, or whatever else you might draw will look a lot better. It goes without saying that human anatomy won't transfer one-to-one to animals. However, the more mastery over anatomy you have, the better you will be able to develop your skills. As you will be able to justify why you draw certain things a certain way, and you won't need to cover up your trash pieces of art with the justification, it's just my art style. How long should you spend at this anatomy stage? Honestly, as long as you feel is necessary. For someone who never did anatomy, focusing on it for a week or even more will reap a lot of benefits. While someone who already has a good grasp can spend overall less time, and focus on the areas he really needs help with, like hands, feet, maybe some parts of the face, etc., etc. So now that you spent a week or so bettering your anatomy, and that you started noticing real improvement in your heart, what's next? Well, now you can start studying manga artists manga artists, whatever you say that. Why manga? Specifically, because in manga there's rarely color. You won't have to worry about values, lighting, and all the other messy things that comes with adding color to your art. In manga, except exceptions, it's pretty much everything white, except the hair and other dark things which are black. There will be some lighting to deal with, and that's to be expected, but since it is usually much tamer in manga, you can take inspiration of how different artists draw different body parts and play with different lighting situations to make the reader feel things. This way you put a feet in the door in the world of lighting without overwhelming yourself with everything else. And you can see mangaka's art styles in their most fundamental form, how they draw things. Also, mangas are just fun to read, so whenever you don't want to study anymore, you can just read them, and by doing so you add them to your visual library. So you can and will steal something from them even without realizing it later on. So how much time should you spend at this stage? Again, as much as you feel is necessary. Studying might be trying to reproduce one of the drawings of an author and trying to understand why they did everything they did in the process. Studying might also be looking attentively to a piece for a while and then trying to create something from your brain that looks like something this author would have drawn. Or it might be another totally different method that I don't know of. But what's for sure is that how long you spend on this part will depend of how much you feel you need. You won't be able to absorb much in only an hour, but you might feel satiated after 5, 10 or more. For me, it depends on how I choose to study. If I go about it the first way, trying to reproduce something, I'll generally last 2 to 3 days because I really want to create something. And with this first method, well, you don't really create anything, you're just reproducing. You might argue that it will lead you to a deeper understanding of this author style, but yet again, it's kind of arguable. The second method, however, I can usually maintain it for as long as I'm able to keep a drawing chain going, which is usually every day of the week for a while, and then a pause to breathe because I just need some breaks sometimes. Because of this method, you grab the essentials of what makes an artist's drawing look like his, and then you create your own from it. That's why you see everyone trying to JoJoify themselves, because it's just fun to imagine what your ideas would look like in someone else's hands. With this method, however, there's a real possibility of missing the forest for the trees, focusing only on the superficial and going to draw instead of taking everything into account and really analyzing why they did it that way. With all this said, once you stole from a few artists, you will now need to dive into color theory. Color is weird. Different hues will equal to different values, and a dark red is not necessarily equal to the same grayscale equivalent as a dark yellow, for example. There's also shadows and lights to take into account. Color is the big mess that takes a while to master. Or maybe it's just me. If you don't want to worry about the complicated stuff, just know that shadows are affected by surroundings. For example, blue sky will give bluish shadows. If surroundings are cold, go with warm light. If surroundings are hot, go with cold light. Never shade with black unless it's for stylistic effect and you know what you're doing. Never shade with the same hue. If, for example, if your flat is red and you have hot shadows, shade with a dark orange or something. This way you'll have something that will pop off way more and won't look flat essentially. Colors are really much more complicated than that, and you will 100% need to go look at other resources than this video to understand them better. I recommend the excellent series by Marco Bucci on this subject, by the way. Link in bio. However, you will have to take some time on your own to learn how colors works and incorporate them to your work. If you never drew with color, don't worry. The feeling of I ruined it by adding color will go away as soon as you get better with it. The point is to get yourself to a level where you have a baseline understanding of color theory, lighting, shadings, and all that good stuff, so that you can understand and steal from other better artists. Honestly, this will take a while. For me, it took a bit over a year of, admittedly, not constant, but somewhat regular drawing, to get to a point where I was actually satisfied with my understanding of colors and what my hearts look like. If you're a painter, it might take less time, but yeah, this takes a while. The next step is then stealing from IG artists and just people who do color, so webtoons, manhwas technically work too. However, I'd go with IG artists since the latter tend to put more emphasis on flats plus shading to gain some time with a sprinkle of lighting. Cause yeah, webtoons and stuff take a lot of time to do. You don't have to go into as much details as like singular IG pieces. While IG artists will generally show you, the whole thing, the whole shebang. Piece, flat, shading, light, even composition sometimes, and background, so really crazy stuff. Yet again, you'll spend as much time here as you feel is necessary. The point is to steal from them. The understanding about how colors work. You might realize by looking at artists like Guways, for example, that how bright a color look really depends of how bright the surrounding colors are. Or learn from artists like Subakai interesting ways to detail and render your art. The point is to steal techniques, try them for yourself, and add your own secret spice to it to make it personal. I would like to finish all that by saying that I use the term steal a lot in this video. I'm not a proponent of plagiarizing, and I assume that you have the brain power to understand that. By stealing, I meant stealing techniques and the like, and improving / altering them to make something more personal, more you. Don't go around copying other people's art style and passing it off as yours. Don't go around copying other people's art style and passing it off as yours. And for the love of God, if you do a study that looks a lot like someone else's piece, please give credits to the artist you take it from. So with these things said, you should be able to assert your path to finding your art style. There are a lot of other things you will have to learn on this path to get results that satisfy you. Things like dynamic poses, backgrounds, however simple they may be, clothing, etc. But for the most part, by doing these 4 things, you'll be able to develop your art style. I said 4, but really, it could have been only 2. Get a baseline skill level in any area you feel is lacking by doing learning on your own, and getting understanding about what specifically you're trying to do, and then go steal from other people who do it better than you. The baseline skill part is extremely important, as it's thanks to that you'll gain the ability to understand why these people you feel are intuitively better than you are actually better than you. It lets you put it into words, or in this case, into concepts. So that's it for today's video. Thanks for watching. With that said, deuces.